started Daedric Influence, my old blog, I meant for it to be a music and video game blog. But very quickly music became the one thing that I focused on, massively because people were sending me albums, labels were connecting with me, and really TechFest, to be honest. If you haven't heard of TechFest, look it up. It's an amazing festival in the north of England. And I was just blown away by the fact that I was being, I was getting to talk to all these amazing musicians, but really I always felt like I missed a beat by not including more gaming in there. So I'm not going to let that happen. So I'm going to talk about gaming today. And this is going to be a new series that I'm going to do called Battling My Backlog. And what I mean by that is I, like so many, suffer from a crippling addiction to buying cheap games. What I mean is I'll see something and think I might want to play that one day, and if it's cheap enough I'll very often buy it, and then it gets stored in a massive backlog of games potentially never to be played. And especially over the last couple of years, been moving between countries, been working really hard at my career. I'll admit, finishing game after game after game hasn't been a #1 priority, but recently I've had a more flexible working schedule, so I've actually been diving into my backlog. So I want to do these videos to sort of cover off each and every step of the way which games have been worth diving back into. Now I've actually finished a few games over the past month and a half, so I'm going to do quite a few of these, one for each game, and hopefully, I know it's not the brand new, most spanking, smoking hot off the press games, but hopefully if you're like me and you have a massive backlog that you haven't gotten back to, maybe this can help you navigate that maze. So the first one I want to talk about is actually something I just finished, and it's the DLC for Dragon Age Inquisition. And I say specifically the DLC because I played the game years ago, but I never really dove into the DLC much, and I actually picked it up again and thought, you know what, I really want to finish this before Dragon Age 4 comes out. So what I did was I got back into it, used my old save. I'll admit I couldn't remember which choices I had made in some parts, so I had to sort of, I guess, reminisce about what relationships I'd had, which characters I'd romanced, but I'll admit as soon as I saw Dorian's face I remembered that I'd romanced him, so not to worry, it came back to me. But I dove right into the Descent, which was the first DLC pack. It then went for Jaws of Hakkon and finally Trespasser. And if you haven't played them yet, but you enjoyed the game back then, I'd definitely say it's really worthwhile for the story element and to, get a deeper dive into some of the characters, especially with Trespasser. However, I will say that there were elements of it that were not at all enjoyable to me, and mostly the combat. Now, I've recently started Witcher 3. I know, I'm super late on that one too, but hopefully a video will come out of that when, I finish the sprawling 300-hour journey that will be. But the combat in Dragon Age Inquisition has not aged well, in my opinion. There were battles in the Descent especially that I just felt went on forever. And maybe I wasn't properly equipped with my team, but it wasn't that the fights were hard. It was just that they were long, and I didn't feel very engaged with the combat system. However, on the flip side of that, I loved how they tied up some loose ends, as well as exploring more the lore of different elements of the world, really. So especially with the Descent, diving into more of the Dwarven lore and how they actually have a really interesting take on the story in that pack. I won't spoil it for you, I know it's old, but if you're going to play it, it's a pretty cool twist. And with Trespasser really tying in the events of the end of the main game, and as far as I can tell, actually setting up really nicely for Dragon Age 4. So I'm really excited to see where that takes the storyline and how that involves all of the different characters, and how, if they do that, how they manage to tie in the player's choice. Because I know that's been an ongoing difficulty of allowing you to take these massive choices that can impact the world. So I'd really love to see how do they take some of the massive decisions in these and have them affect Dragon Age 4, or whether they just sort of go a few years into the future and say, oh, the Inquisitor, he or her really did a thing back then, right? like they did sort of in the second one. So I'm quite curious to see, because really they did do a lot of, I guess, loose end tying, and they did a great job of bringing all the characters back and showing you what they'd been up to for the last couple of years. So in general, I'd say it is worth your time, especially, like I said, Descent from the Dwarven lore, even though the combats were a bit weak, and Trespasser from a storyline perspective purely and for setting up game number 4, but that leaves Jaws of Hakken. Now, Jaws of Hakken felt mediocre, to be honest. It was a new area to explore, so it had the Astrariums, it had the Skull Shards, so it did feel, well, it reminded me of why I liked Dragon Age Inquisition. It was fun, but the storyline wasn't as engaging, and like I said, because I'd sort of soured on the combat, it wasn't quite what I wanted it to be. However, I definitely don't regret spending time on it, and I do look forward to playing game number 4, and, well, I look forward to continuing my journey through my backlog. So, what games are on your backlog, and what are you going to play next? I personally am going to do the next video on the Doom game that came out in 2016. Finally got around to playing that, but other games that I'm going to talk about soon are the Devil May Cry game that Team Ninja made, Adventure Time Pirates of the Enchiridion. I wanted to play that. It came up on Games with Gold, so decided to finish that. Actually only took a couple days. And then, who knows, I've got some other games on the go, and like I said, hopefully at some point I'll finish The Witcher and do one of these for that. Maybe even before the Witcher TV series comes out. Who knows? But until then, I'd love to know more about what your backlog looks like and what you're looking forward to playing.